Because obviously Anya Taylor-Joy is speaking Spanish. Her husband is even responding in Spanish. You see Rosalia respond in Spanish, and then Jenna's like, oh yeah, nice to see you.
Shit. I'm the one calling the shots. I don't get stuck in the box. Feel like I've been through a lot.
Latinos who can't speak Spanish. Looks like Brett Cooper has something to say about it. Let's check it out. It says she's Latina, but she can't speak to them. I don't know who exactly she's talking about, but we're going to find out right now.
I'm Brett Cooper. So the more woke that society gets, the more Hollywood complains and protests about issues that I don't think they even care about or believe in. They only do it because it's in vogue, which obviously we know. Like, it's very popular for celebrities to advocate for representation, especially of, different diverse ethnic backgrounds, because of how much it affects them and how connected they are to that culture that they want to see represented. And Hollywood eats it up. And then oftentimes we find that the celebrities who are loudest about this desperate need for representation aren't even that connected to the cultures that they are demanding be represented. And that is the story we're talking about today. But before we get into it, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to this channel if you have not already, and ring that notification bell so that you never miss a comment section or off the clock episode. So this whole story started from a viral video that came out of Milan Fashion Week with Jenna Ortega and Anya Taylor-Joy, both actresses. Now for context, I'm guessing that most people know who Jenna Ortega is. She is an actress. She plays Wednesday in the Netflix show Wednesday. She's blown up recently, has become very popular and very famous. And if you have followed her for a while, you've probably seen her speak out time and time again on behalf of the
Jenna Ortega was a G in Wednesday. I liked Wednesday.
Latino community. She's talked about how she doesn't feel like they're represented in Hollywood and how much it means for her to represent those roles in Hollywood. Here's a headline: Wednesday, Jenna Ortega discusses what playing a Latina means to her. And in all of these interviews and these articles, she says that she is, very proud of her culture and her heritage, which is a good thing. She's proud of the opportunity to represent this culture, but she feels the need to bring it up everywhere, all the time, as if anybody is acting like being Latino is an issue in the first place. Here's another article that reads, Jenna Ortega talks about growing up immersed in the Hispanic community. And here's the thing. She should be proud of where she's come from and her culture and her heritage and her family, but representation does not need to be inserted into every single conversation. There are other topics at hand that could be discussed, like her talent and the project that she's working on, and people online are getting increasingly fed up with this discourse and the diverse remakes and the casting choices that make people feel like Hollywood is just trying to check a box. And spoiler alert, they are. Anyway, the reason why this is all very relevant is because of that viral video that I mentioned at the beginning. And the video is of Anya Taylor-Joy at Milan Fashion Week introducing her husband to the Spanish singer Rosalia and Jenna Ortega. Now, this was a very innocent moment caught on camera, but it did not turn out well for Jenna. So it's very, very brief. Like, I saw this video last week, swiped by it, did not think anything of it. But people on Twitter dove into it real quick. Because obviously Anya Taylor-Joy is speaking Spanish. Her husband is even responding in Spanish. You see Rosalia respond in Spanish, and then Jenna's like, oh yeah, nice to see you, in English, and then awkwardly turns away.
Are you a Mexican or a Mexicant?
And like I said, people caught on to that very quickly. Somebody posted this meme and said Jenna Ortega when Anya started speaking in Spanish.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Somebody else commented, the fact that Anya's husband probably understands more Spanish than Jenna Ortega is so funny to me. And then she goes and comments in Spanish, and I'm not even gonna try to read that because I did that once and I got made fun of. I'm not doing that again. I'm too white for that. Anyway, the point is, her dog probably speaks better Spanish than Jenna Ortega. Her dog probably also likes rough greens, because that would be an intelligent thing to like. Now, there is very little that I love more than my dogs, and obviously because I love them, I want them to be as healthy as...
Okay, she's going into an advertisement, but... So if Jenna Ortega does not speak Spanish, it's very hard for you to be immersed in Latino culture without being able to speak the language. There's actually a lot more that comes out of someone when they're speaking their native language. They're actually able to express themselves differently. You can express emotions in different ways through different languages. If anybody who's watching this speaks more than one language, they'll know what I'm talking about. You can expand on ideas differently through different languages. For some ideas, it's easier to express them in English for me. For other ideas, it's easier to express them in Spanish. And you don't really get the person's base personality if their native language is Spanish, so you wouldn't get that direct culture as much if you're unable to speak Spanish with them, because there is actual psychological backing towards this. You can do research if you want. People have slightly different personalities in accordance to the language they're speaking. So when somebody speaks more than one language, when they're speaking either or language, they'll have slightly different expressions, a slightly different personality in accordance to the language that they're speaking. So it is difficult. And also, being Latino is not as much of a race thing, if not more of a cultural thing. There are white Latinos, black Latinos, Asian Latinos, you name it. If you're born in Latin America, you're considered Latino. It's not really necessarily a race thing. So you can have Latino roots, but by not knowing the language, you're kind of disconnected from the culture in a way. You could have been raised eating the food and listening to the music, so you could have a bit of the culture, but you can't really be immersed completely into the culture without speaking the language. Plus, if you're Latino and you feel pride in your culture, you can learn for free on Google. So when it comes to modern day time, if you're unable to speak a language, it's just out of your lack of desire to put in the effort. So it's your own choice. It doesn't have to do with my parents didn't teach me like it did in the past. Now you can just learn for free online. It's not that big of a deal. It takes time, yeah, but so does everything else.
As possible, and that is why I love being partners with Rough Greens. Naturopathic Dr. Dennis Black, the founder of Rough Greens, is focused on improving the health of...
Although I am talking out of my ass a little bit there because I've been bilingual my entire life. It's not like I went out of my way to learn Spanish, so who knows? I probably would have put the effort in, but who knows how successful I would have been at it. I never had to work at it as far as I can remember, because when I was a baby, I was already able to understand both languages. I mean, infant, no, but I was always spoken to in both languages. I was always able to grasp both.
Comments. Now, obviously, the comments I just read to you were in English, but the majority of the replies, the comments, and the quote tweets were all from Spanish-speaking Latinas, and this TikToker breaks it down well.
This one Twitter user said, y así es como se termina el debate de quién es Latina y quién no en Hollywood. Muchas gracias, Anya. Translated to, and this is how the debate of who is Latina and who isn't in Hollywood ends. Thank you, Anya. This one said, la latina que nos representa mejor es la más blanca, y los gringos venden como latinas a las otras dos. Saying the Latina that best represents us is the whitest one, and Hollywood tries to sell the other two as Latinas. One of the last ones I'm going to show you because there's a million says that one would think that for all the noise Jenna and Rachel made for the Latina representation, they'd at least speak Spanish.
And I thought these comments were important to show because I wanted you to see that this was not the, anti-woke, anti-representation crowd getting angry at Jenna Ortega. This was her own community calling her out for maybe being a fraud and not actually representing them well. Like, that's a bigger deal. And the reason that so many people thought that this was funny, like one of those commenters said, is because if you just looked at Anya Taylor-Joy, she seems pretty white. So her speaking perfect Spanish while Jenna Ortega and Rachel Zegler just stare at her blankly obviously threw people off. But Anya has an extremely culturally and ethnically diverse background, as she was born in Miami and then she was raised in Argentina and in London, and Spanish was actually her first language. One article said, Taylor-Joy to this day takes great pride in her Argentine culture. Quote, I come from many different places, but I think my warmth and attitude in life comes from Argentina. I'm very grateful for that part of my story.
Yeah. So I think what Jenny Ortega's speaking about when she's talking about Latino representation is basically people that have the appearance of being Latino. There's not many stereotypical looking Latinos in Hollywood. I mean, there's a lot more now. I actually think there's a pretty decent representation. If you look back in movies in the 80s, there wasn't really much at all. But yeah, she's thinking about it from an American standpoint, like they think of white people versus black people versus Indian people. They're thinking about skin color. Latinos don't really think about Latinos through skin color. Like outside of the US, they don't think that way. They think of it more of a cultural thing. Latino is more of a cultural thing. People from Argentina are typically white. Like you see that actress there, I forgot her name already. She looks white. Latino, so Argentinian people are typically white. They're not always white either. That's also a stereotype of Argentinian people. There's all kinds of different races in Argentina. But basically what Latinos are anyways is just different Native American countries that were colonized by white people from Spain, similar to the US. Instead of England, it was Spain. They colonized the country, mixed with the Native American people, mostly the women, killed off the men, made mixed race children, then brought over slaves. And this is more common in like Ecuador, Colombia, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Cuba. They've also mixed with Africans, so a lot of Latinos from the Caribbean, Venezuela as well. They have a lot of African heritage, Native American heritage, white heritage from Spain. So Latinos are basically just racially mixed people. So it's not really a racial identity, if not more of a cultural identity. For example, people from Puerto Rico, my family comes from Puerto Rico, basically everything, they're like everything in a pot mixed together, because think of a small island that's hot, it's on the beach, you know, girls walking around in bikinis and shit. Everybody's mixing together, you know. Puerto Ricans are just everything mixed together. A couple people in my family took those 23andMe tests, and they have like every race under the sun. My cousin even had Egyptian. Like, Puerto Ricans are basically everything mixed together, you know. Get into Mexicans, it's a little bit more Native American and white, but yeah, it's like I'm just dragging it out. It's not a racial thing as much as it is cultural. So you are missing an element by not being able to speak the language. But at the same time, I know what she's coming from, because there is the typical Latino look, right, that Americans think of when they see Latinos, because they're mostly used to seeing Puerto Ricans and Mexicans. And Jenna Ortega does have that look, and she does feel that look is underrepresented in Hollywood. Although I don't really give a shit about inclusivity and wokeism and none of that stuff anyways. I'm just trying to see her point of view.
And I'm very proud to come from Argentina. And it's all just so ironic, because Anya had this incredibly culturally rich and diverse upbringing, but she is not the one talking to the press every day about needing more representation in Hollywood so that she can be seen, and making that her whole personality. And obviously, it's important to note that language is not everything. And Jenna Ortega not knowing how to speak Spanish does not diminish her family's background, but it is just ironic, and we should be able to point this out. Now, after this video went viral, people were very quick to find other instances online of Jenna Ortega not being able to speak Spanish, and the comments were just too funny not to share. This is not to shame her or anything like that. It's just incredibly, incredibly ironic.
Los invito a ver
el estreno de Merlina en Netflix.
el estreno
El estreno de Merlina en Netflix.
en Netflix. Los
El-
invito a ver
El estreno de Merlina en Netflix.
el estreno de Merlina en Netflix.
There was another video that people pulled where she was on
Hey, at least her accent's better than the typical white person speaking Spanish. Los invito a ver el estreno de Merlina en Netflix. That would be like the typical American accent. Los invito a ver el estreno de la... Oh, fuck, I forget what it was. All right.
a live stream, and there were commenters saying, speak Spanish to us, like, what words do you know? And she was sitting in her room and she was like, chair, desk.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
Great Spanish speaking.
Like, obviously she is trying, but people think that she would know how to speak Spanish because of how much she talks about her Latino community. Again, it's just ironic and it's too good. Somebody said that's Taco Bell Spanish. Somebody else said trying to speak Spanish, not her actually speaking Spanish. Another person said half the words she was struggling with are English, LOL. And all joking aside, I really do mean it when I say that language does not determine your heritage at all. Like, one person commented and said, Jenna Ortega was raised in a family with Latin roots, and her mom, Natalie, possesses Latina traits. Just because she does not speak Spanish does not mean that she isn't connected to her heritage. I also don't speak English proficiently, despite the fact that I had a Brit great-granddad. I'm a Latina. But it is just incredibly eye-opening and ironic to see these situations in which people who are at the forefront of this, woke representation fight aren't even fully immersed in that culture themselves. Like, we see through it. Like, even Jenna says it in this video right here.
No, I've never been to Puerto Rico, and I would love to go just because culture and, becoming closer with my heritage, but
it's very
I think
awkward.
a big part of it for me too is I don't speak Spanish. It's something that I'm very familiar with. I just never learned how to properly speak or proper grammar, so that creates some sort of disconnect. And even now, I think, Latin representation in media is so weak, and
I mean, you got to give her a break. This is what kids are taught now in school. Jenny Ortega is basically a kid. She's super young. You don't got to put so much pressure on her. She's trying to do what she was taught was right to do. This is what this whole generation is taught to put importance on, to focus on. It's taught that these things are so important and there's so much social justice issues and blah, blah, blah. She still has some growing up to do, some maturing to do. She could hire a coach and learn Spanish. It's not that difficult. I mean, well, actually, there are people who do struggle a lot with language. I shouldn't say that. I have an uncle who doesn't speak Spanish very well, even though he grew up his whole entire life speaking Spanish. So there are people who do struggle with it. I'm not going to discredit that. But yeah, she's young. She's getting a lot more pressure than probably she can handle at her age, and she is a highly skilled actress, and I don't think we really need to listen to her opinions too much considering her age. It's just what I think, but it is what it is. And also, being woke is kind of anti-Latino if you think about it, because if you have Latino friends, or if you are Latino yourself, you would know right away that Latinos rag on each other. Well, black people do that too. They rag on each other, they rip on each other, they tell offensive jokes. Every offensive joke that you could think of is perfectly fine and appropriate to say in front of Latinos. It's not offensive. They just laugh. You can see your friend and he got fat and you go, damn, you look like a fucking walrus, and he'll just laugh and rip back on you. It's not the same as American culture. The wokeism is kind of like the polar opposite of Latino culture. So there's kind of a disconnect there, just to be honest with you. That's something that you will figure out if you have Latino friends who are actually Latino, who were born here and are super whitewashed. If they get offended, they're whitewashed. I'm just letting you know that right now. Pero nos vemos la próxima. All right, just throw in some Spanish. I'll see you guys next time.